bear with me. And as a prologue, I like to comment on and make content that I can personally verify and confirm. So much spin and disinformation these days. Not all non-native species are a problem, and sometimes native species, if not kept in check, can be. Not all non-native species are invasive, though all plants will grow and colonise to the best of their ability. That's life. This is moss, and it invades every year. Creeping buttercup, docks, brambles, or as they're called here in Ireland, briars, are like triffids here, as are the willows, sallies, tomatoes, potatoes, native to South America, spinach, originally from Persia, modern day Iran. Plenty of people here in West Clare, Ireland and globally growing non-native foods, and some of those here are staunch advocates of native species. The cilantro bolted this year, and the native pollinating insects love the flowers of this non-native plant. There's lots of seed pods. Hopefully I will get some viable seed to plant. I had an interesting comment and replies a couple of videos back, and I've copied them into this video. Initially I replied with my reasons for planting non-native eucalyptus and paulownia here in Ireland, though the response wasn't quite what I was expecting. I've quoted from the original.
Worried about the ecosystem, but planting non-native plants that destroy the local ecosystem.
Nothing could be further from the truth. Do share this video. I'd love to hear what others have to say. I'm genuinely interested in constructive debate. Ireland's been very progressive when it comes to experimenting with eucalyptus, with the first plantations dating back to the 1890s. I reckon if there was going to be an issue, we'd know about it by now. I've recently been getting inquiries from foresters who, having harvested their non-native Sitka spruce, are now looking around for alternative forestry species to replant. Definite interest in paulownia. It's very popular in much of continental Europe because it's very profitable. The comment implied that all non-native species were bad for biodiversity and local ecology, claiming that they don't provide any habitat or food. Besides the hares, one of which you can see nesting in the eucalyptus gunnii hedge, there's loads of field mice and rats here now, though the native red fox seems to have eaten most of the rats. Still, the fox is fantastic for keeping the hares away from my paulownia plantation. Bees love eucalyptus flowers. The winter of 21-22 was very mild, and these pulverulenta started flowering in February, which was a godsend to the bees, which had woken up early due to the unseasonably warm weather, providing them with much needed food. Evidently, the non-native species that I've planted and nurtured here do add habitat and food to the ecology. After reading these comments several times, I'm still not sure whether they're genuine or AI generated, an attempt perhaps by a vested interest to dissuade. So as I say, I would love to have your feedback and hear what others have to say.
Worried about the ecosystem, but planting non-native plants that destroy the local ecosystem? In the US, we've seen a loss of 30 million songbirds because folks have planted non-native plants so much, and the local insect population declines as a result since they have less food. No insects means no food for baby birds.
I note the emotive use of the words baby birds. Plenty of baby birds here, plenty of birds here, plenty of insects for them to feed on. A family of blue tits nest and fledge from that wee box every year, right next to the non-native Eucalyptus gunnii. The wrens love nesting in this non-native climber. I think it's a passion flower. Lots of swallows and house martins this year. I do encourage them. I have put up nesting boxes for them. However, they wouldn't be here if there wasn't a food source for them, i.e. lots of insects.
Bradford pear, honeysuckle, kudzu, English ivy. The list of plants that have gotten out of containment to pollute the natural environment is very long, and the damage done is almost invisible because people only see the green and think everything's wonderful. In reality, millions of acres of land have been lost to the ecosystem, no different than an oil spill.
Quite a comparison. Aye, highly emotive.
Because those plants haven't evolved with a local food web, nothing eats the non-native plants or uses them as homes, so they can grow at a much faster rate and outcompete the native plants.
Caterpillars love eating the non-native Paulownia, and the slugs have dined out on both the Paulownia and the eucalyptus this year. Paulownia are highly nutritious. One reason I doubt they're going to be invasive here in Ireland. Besides the caterpillars, the slugs, the hares, herbivores, rabbits, deer, not to mention the cattle, will devour them before they get a chance to establish.
Dr. Doug Tallamy calls for smaller lawns, has done quite a few videos on the issue, and I'm sure the data he's collected over the years would be applicable to Ireland as much as the US and Canada.
My patch was more or less all lawn when I arrived, and now look at it. From very limited research, my understanding is the grass we currently use for lawns and as livestock fodder here in Ireland is originally from the Mediterranean.
Given the choice between salix and eucalyptus, I'd choose the native willow without hesitation. The willow feeds the local food web, providing homes and foods for the pollinators and birds.
As I've shown you, the bees love eucalyptus flowers, as do all the pollinators here. The marked increase in bird species is to some extent down to my providing food for them during the winter, though I also leave all the berries from the whitethorn, growing right next to Eucalyptus gunnii, these elderberries, growing right next to the Eucalyptus viminalis, both native to Ireland. I haven't removed anything since I've been here. I've left all the native trees and plants. In fact, I've added to them, including planting these wildflowers, which provide an abundance of seeds, which again I leave for the birds to feed on during the late autumn, winter. Some of these flowers are still flowering. Fantastic. The range of eucalyptus I've planted here are now maturing, and between all of them I'm hoping that they'll provide flowers and therefore food for pollinating insects for most of the year. Paulownia produce an amazing abundance of purple flowers early spring, another source of food for pollinating insects, and hopefully, fingers crossed next year, but certainly the year after that, I'm hoping to have that amazing display of purple flowers.
Ireland is suffering from a loss of biodiversity simply because the people of Ireland don't see their green spaces as a finite resource. Importing thousands of immigrants every year means more need for houses, roads, and the like. Destroying the traditional hedgerows in favor of wire fencing, that's easier, also destroys vital habitat for small mammals and everything else. But trying to explain that to folks is an uphill battle. People will opt for what they want, what they see as immediately better for them, and that's why we are at the point we are.
You seem to be remarkably well informed about the Irish nation. I wonder if you've ever lived here. I wouldn't put myself down as being flavour of the month so far as the local farmers are concerned. They're not particularly keen on trees. Anyways, fair play to them and credit where it's due. They've left large tracts of wild land and hedgerows, possibly one of the major factors which has resulted in so many hedgerows and so much wild land in rural Ireland on rural farms is that when Ireland gained its independence and land reform was introduced, the tendency was for much smaller farming units rather than larger industrial farms. Though there's also legislation to encourage farmers to retain and plant hedgerows as well as setting aside land for wilderness. Importing thousands of migrants? I am a migrant, and unless you're Native American, then your ancestors are migrants as well, possibly from Europe. My reply to the comment, read by the Scottish computer voice.
On my small patch of land, which was non-native grass, lawn when I arrived, after planting the eucalyptus, which aren't invasive here in Ireland, I have many more native insects, plants and animals. I hear the concerns of the non-native lobby, though it often lacks a balanced argument. Before I planted even one eucalyptus here, I did a full year of research. Before I planted even one paulownia here, I did too. 10,000 years ago, Ireland was covered in ice. Go back further in time, and it was tropical rainforest and swamp, so native species are just a small moment in the eons of time. One of the primary reasons for me promoting eucalyptus here in Ireland is as an alternative carbon neutral, sustainable alternative to burning turf, which is extremely environmentally detrimental, especially when it comes to climate change, droughts, wildfires and then torrential rain and flooding here in Europe, not to mention the recent unusual storms in the Americas, convince me that my small efforts to counteract climate change are worthwhile. The evident increase in species assures me that I am adding to biodiversity, native and non-native, which can only be a good thing. The small ecosystem here is healthy and in balance. The huge increase in birds, insects, native wildflowers and mammals are testament to this.
The reply to my reply.
Except that the premise at the foundation doesn't match the science we've accumulated. That's why I cited Dr. Talamy's work.
Who are we?
In short, the idea that since everything is so ephemeral, doing what you want, as it pleases you, is perfectly acceptable. Having worked in the green industry for years, I'm familiar with that concept, and it's why we saw the death of the American chestnut and millions of acres destroyed by kudzu.
I've never suggested that people just do as they please, and have stated that before I planted any of the non-native trees here, eucalyptus or paulownia, I've researched thoroughly. It's very saddening to see the demise of so many species worldwide, plants and animals. Nothing I've done has contributed to that decline, quite the reverse. Since I've been here and planted all these non-native species and encouraged native species, there's far more abundance of wildlife, plant and animal.
The science clearly shows that when you add a non-native plant to an ecosystem it hasn't evolved with, the best you can hope for is a zero sum.
This is simply untrue. For what I've achieved here in a very short space of time, there's far more biodiversity and wildlife, significantly so. And apart from the eucalyptus, paulownia, a few hybrid poplar, which are starting to show real promise now, some lavender, which the bees and pollinators also love. All but one life form is native to Ireland, and I'd hasten to add that that life form, blue gum psyllid, was endemic to Ireland before I arrived, and to the best of my knowledge and my observations here, it only feasts on eucalyptus, young eucalyptus. And also the earwigs love feasting on the larvae of blue gum psyllid, so I've actually added another food source to the native population of insects.
More often than not, unfortunately, it's actually a detriment to the local ecosystem because it crowds out the native species that the animals have evolved to rely on. A classic example of this would be the monarch butterfly population, declining because the milkweed plants they rely on have been fairly destroyed in large sections of land, so there isn't a continuous chain of the plant from north to south.
Was it just the planting of non-native species that caused the decrease in the milkweed and therefore monarch butterflies, or was it a combination of factors? Industrial agriculture, human settlement, spraying of chemicals, pesticides, other pollutants? I don't actually know, though consequences are often caused by a variety of nuanced, localized geographical factors. Certainly, I'd attribute the huge increase in the numbers of butterflies, insects, and other wildlife here to my policy of not spraying any chemicals, herbicides, or pesticides.
I would also point out that your estimation of the climate seems a bit contradictory.
This is the bit that really got me and why I'm devoting so much time to making a video about these comments.
If things are changing so much that Ireland was under a glacier 10,000 years ago, and was a swamp before that, how can we say that anything seen today is problematic rather than simply part of the process of change? The storms in the US are no more powerful or plentiful than they were 100 years ago. The sea levels haven't risen, as shown by Ellis Island photographs from the late 1800s or early 1900s.
Check out what NASA has to say about sea level rise. I'll assume that you would agree NASA is a credible information source. As for extreme climatic events, I'll assume that you'll be happy to relay your information to the so many people globally who including the US, who have suffered during the past few years, many losing everything they've worked so hard to build. Many areas can no longer get insurance cover, and I very much doubt that the insurance companies who were quite happy to insure these areas previously have suddenly just lost interest. Rather, it's because it's no longer financially viable for them. They're having to pay out so much for claims after extreme weather events.
And even if things were getting measurably worse, how can we know that introducing non-native plants is the right solution? After all, it takes millennia for evolution to happen. That means many species of insects, pollinators, and birds will go extinct in the meantime as their food sources are removed in favor of the non-native plants. We're already seeing that worldwide, which would indicate that the idea non-natives don't hurt things isn't valid.
Nothing going extinct here. Everything's thriving. Certainly, large palm oil plantations haven't helped, with huge swathes of rainforest being felled. And it would be a really cold person who didn't feel for the orangutans' loss of habitat. Large quantities of Amazon rainforest likewise being felled for cattle grazing. So thankfully the current administration is addressing that issue. However, your original comment was a criticism of me personally and what I'm doing here. I quote back,
Worried about the ecosystem, but planting non-native plants that destroy the local ecosystem.
Nothing being destroyed here. There's far more biodiversity and wildlife after I've planted all these non-native trees, eucalyptus and paulownia, which have grown rapidly, capturing carbon in the process. Besides high quality firewood fuel for myself, sustainable firewood fuel, eucalyptus and paulownia are both high value, high quality constructional timber trees. Fabulous wind protection as well from the Atlantic gales, something that didn't occur to me when I first planted them. Contrary to popular perception, eucalyptus trees are not shallow rooted and will withstand very severe storms, more so perhaps than the native species.
In short, I'd posit that the only rational option is to stick with what you know works.
Fabulous. I've already demonstrated that growing eucalyptus and paulownia here works. improving biodiversity and generally making this a far more pleasant habitat both for me and all the wildlife, big and small.
What's been proven to work over the last 1,000 years? As the old saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We know the native plants work in the local ecosystem. We have hundreds of examples of non-native plants causing problems in the local ecosystems. So, a recent France 24 YouTube suggests a 50% increase in native species 3 mortality due to longer and more severe droughts. So, in Germany, renowned for its forests, the more frequent and severe droughts are impacting soil hydration, and mature old growth conifer forests are suffering as a result. So, both eucalyptus and paulownia are deeper rooted than many native species, and therefore their ability to help solve some of the forestry issues, certainly here in Ireland, shouldn't be discounted. So, according to one Bloomberg report, the world has lost a fifth of its capacity to produce food. Very important to us humans and all carbon-based life forms, food. In the US Northwest and Canada, the likes of Douglas fir are having their reproductive cycles disrupted due to higher temperatures caused by anthropic climate change. Many tree species are being attacked by larger infestations of insects which proliferate in higher temperatures, while at the same time the health of these trees is being degraded by lack of hydration due to, again, longer and more frequent droughts. A double whammy, as they say in Scotland. Not to mention the increasing severity of wildfires on every continent. Generally, a less dogmatic approach would be helpful. Thanks a mil for watching. Really looking forward to all your comments. Good luck meantime.